Andrew Clennell, thank you so much for joining me. The rest of the country is sure paying for Victoria's mistakes here.
Well, yes. I mean, Annastacia Palaszczuk, due to announce what she's doing on the borders tomorrow. At the very least, she'll be continuing the closure of the border to Victoria, but there's real suspicion now, given she won't even let AFL teams into her state, that she will keep the borders shut for everyone. Likewise, South Australia, certainly there'll be a closure of the border to Victoria, but it could be more far-reaching than that. So it really has some massive economic consequences, and I think if you spoke to people in North Queensland and those tourist spots in particular, they'd be talking to you about the utter devastation this is having. The international border closures are bad enough for them, let alone this. And it's a real blow, isn't it? I mean, I also expect tomorrow Daniel Andrews to announce some certain suburbs and hotspots will be just shut down hard, a bit like northwest Tasmania was in April. When there were 111 new cases a day in Victoria, he was shutting pubs, cafes, restaurants all through the state. That won't be happening. But now we've got 75 and climbing. There's absolutely no doubt he'll be doing shutdowns, and the Prime Minister appeared to indicate that today. So the real hope is those sort of limited shutdowns can get on top of the thing, because it's very, very disappointing.
It sure is, and it's really going to hurt the Morrison government's plans to get the country back to work. I mean, it's desperate for that to happen and for us to start paying for these hideously expensive virus schemes to keep people in jobs, JobKeeper, JobSaver, all those sort of things. I was interested by New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet. He's been lobbying for changes to the GST to scrap the sufficient taxes to sort of help this recovery. And I was even more interested by the Prime Minister's non-response today when you put that to him. Here is that exchange.
You've spoken about the need for tax reform out the back of this crisis. Would you consider taking to the next election either an increase in the GST or a broadening of the base of the GST in order to get rid of and decrease other taxes, or is that something you would rule out?
Well, what I'm focused on at the moment is the decisions the government has to make in relation to JobSeeker and JobKeeper, and they're important decisions as we move to the next phase post-September. And I've got to say, Andrew, that's where my attention is right now.
So it's something you might consider down the track?
No, Andrew, I'm not going to let you put words in my mouth. I've said what I've said. You know, we're focused on the questions that Australians are most interested in at the moment, and that is, frankly, the next phase beyond JobSeeker and JobKeeper. There is still a lot of work to do there, and that's what we're focused on.
Are you concerned that...
No, it's not a one-on-one today, Andrew.
What's the government's thinking here, Andrew?
Well, I guess he's leaving all options open, the PM, isn't he? And there is a distinct school of thought in government that, I guess, provided there are no more outbreaks like there are in Victoria, that you can keep a bit of support going, get infrastructure going this year, and next year, in order to get the economy back somewhere towards where it was, do some of the big reforms you need to do to get people back in jobs. And that involves, as the Prime Minister set out, skills reform, IR reform, tax reform, and that could include the GST. Now, people out there would probably say, how can increasing the GST or broadening its base help us? That means, you know, we'd be more out of pocket. But what it does is it means you can get rid of much more inefficient taxes and taxes that cost jobs, like payroll tax. And Dominic Perrottet will be at the National Press Club on Wednesday advocating for such a system. He's got a review commission of federal-state relations. He wants to get rid of payroll tax and stamp duty. His argument is he'll need more GST revenue in order to do that. We know Josh Frydenberg, the Treasurer, has told his coalition party room the states need to do more if they want to do tax reform. But Scott Morrison, very interesting now to me and to Kieran Gilbert, he hasn't ruled out taking the next election changes to the GST. And there's a lot of people out there, I think economists and people in the Liberal Party, who are hoping he takes that brave step, because the argument is, apart from work choices, which ultimately was overturned, there hasn't been a big reform for 20 years, economic reform by a government since the introduction of the GST. It would be a brave decision indeed, but these are very unusual circumstances, and people will be looking to solutions to get out of this crisis. And to do that sort of big reform, you'd need a mandate. So there's even a suggestion there could be an election second half of next year. Let's see how brave Scott Morrison is on that front, Andrew.
Yeah, I've got a couple of doubts about this plan. One is that I suspect the revenue-raising potential is very much uppermost in some people's mind, which is the last thing we need with the economy so flat. And shopkeepers won't want a bigger price tag to scare off buyers that they're trying desperately to get back into their shops. But, you know, we've been surprised by a lot of things in politics in the last decade. Andrew Clennell, thank you so much indeed for joining me.
Thanks, Andrew.